This is it, the Lichtenburg 400, round 5 of the 2019 SACCS. As the penultimate round of the year, this was the one that could dash title hopes or bring championship glory. It was a short notice change from Harrismith to the northwest town, but fear not, there was plenty to cheer about nonetheless. All the adrenaline and dust of the race are brought to you by Toyota, Ford, Total Quartz and Pirelli. Welcome to the very dry and dusty northwest province, and more specifically, the town of Lichtenburg. It's got a population of 26,000 and is the final resting place of General Delarey, who was a central figure in the Boer War. But a war of a different kind was on the cards for the weekend of the 13th and 14th of September, as the South African cross-country series rolled into town. Remember, this race was originally scheduled to take place in Harrismith, but high fire probabilities forced the race to relocate, and after a gargantuan effort by the race organisers, the Lichtenburg 400 was ready for action. And what an action-packed weekend it was. For the championship hopefuls, this was the opportunity to seal the deal, and for those who could still catch the leaders, this was probably the last chance saloon. So let's take a quick look at the lay of the land, with just the final 2 rounds to go. The battle for Class FIA honours was over by the shouting after round 4 already, with Toyota Gazoo Racing SA's Henk Ladergan claiming the title for the 2nd year running. Teammate Janelle de Villiers was 33 points adrift and could theoretically still catch up to Ladergan. In Class T, the honours had already gone to Ford's Lance Woolridge, who had a lead of 66 points over arch-rival from Malalan Toyota, Johan Horn. Jacques Van Tonder was in 3rd within sniffing distance of the Horns, whilst Gareth Woolridge had 4th ahead of Atlas Copco's Gary Berthold. Class S was really just the David Huddy show, with the Nissan Navara streets ahead of his rivals. The big noise, however, was for the overall production title, which was a 2-horse race between Toyota's Henk Ladergan and Ford's Lance Woolridge. Red versus blue, as has been the case for many years. Ladergan had the upper hand, 23 points clear of his rival, but with 30 points on offer for a win and plenty of permutations to work through, there was still a chance for Woolridge to make up ground and take the title chase to the final round come November. Over on the special vehicle side of the championship, it's big Lance Trathui who found himself with a comfortable lead of 41 points over Tahir Masaji. Clint Gibson, John Telford and John Thompson completed the top 5. In Class P, Nick Gosler ruled the roost, with Julio Ferreira 11 points back and Keith McInerney barely on the scoreboard. In the side-by-side category, stalwart Werner Mostert still held a healthy lead of 43 points, with Vickers Haasbroek in 2nd and Christo Rose now in 3rd. We caught up with some of the big guns prior to the race, starting with the man at the top of the overall production championship standings, Toyota's Henk Ladergan. For him, the title was within sniffing distance now.
I think this race will be similar to the last one. The guy that makes the least amount of mistakes should be the one on top, because there's not a lot of time to gain and a lot of time to lose.
For defending champion Janelle de Villiers, the Lichtenburg 400 might well bring an end to his reign, but a win would go a long way to restoring his confidence after failing to score meaningful points since round 2 at the Berg 400.
But we've been here before, so there's some rough places here as well. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, we had after our test we had in Namibia, we made some small changes, and it'll be good to see how it goes in race conditions.
Teammate Shamir Varioa had climbed to within 4 points of de Villiers, and the former special vehicle champion had shown consistent pace over the latter part of the season. A good result here could sneak him ahead of de Villiers.
We've been consistent, and yes, we've been also changing the car a bit to suit us and get us faster, and I think we're there.
Over in the Castrol Ford cross-country team, Lance Woolridge had already sewn up the Class T title, but there was still plenty of reason for the young Italian to go racing.
You know, it's sort of in the back of my head. We're 2nd overall still in the overall championship, ahead of a lot of the FIA cars, so I'd like to keep that. Who knows what happens, maybe something happens up front.
His arch-rival Johan Horn had a torrid year in the Malalan Toyota Hilux. Even so, racing drivers are racing drivers for a reason, and even though the title was out of his reach, Horn wasn't planning on holding back.
We've got to fight for the 2nd place now. But yeah, anything can happen. We're going to fight until the end.
The man at the top of the special vehicle pile, Lance Trathui, may well have wrapped up the championship at round 4, had things not gone wrong for the big man and his little navigator, Adrian Roots.
Yeah, it is looking good, but we got to finish, So I think we're going to go in the time trial and then let's see what happens tomorrow. But we've come to race, and at the end of the day, the goal is to win the championship.
There was also an interesting shift in the lineup for the Lichtenburg 400, with Richard Leek Jr. moving up from Class T Ford Ranger to a Class FIA Miss Navarra as part of the Redline Motorsport outfit now.
We've done a bit of testing on Sunday. The car feels awesome so far. Still very new to us. I'm still getting comfortable with the car, so I think today's going to be a whole learning curve.
But as much as there were championships to be decided and a race to be won, there was another drawing card at the Lichtenburg 400 in the form of double F1 champion, Le Mans winner and current holder of the WEC world title, Fernando Alonso. The Spaniard was in South Africa to continue his training with a possible entry to the 2020 Dakar Rally, and the Lichtenburg 400 was his first competitive outing in the TGR Toyota Hilux. To make things even more exciting, Alonso had 5-time Dakar winner Mark Comer reading the notes. This is racing royalty, and the excitement surrounding the pair was palpable throughout the weekend.
Here we are in my first ever cross-country race, and today a couple of kilometers to get used to the car, shake down the car as well, and tomorrow some action with more cars. Normally I've been testing alone with my teammate, with Ginil, and it will be the very first time with more people and clear rules and countdown and things like that. So very new first time things for me tomorrow, and looking forward.
Yeah, I'm happy, it's to be part of this project with Fernando. It's something that really special for me. When we start to talk about that was, for me personally, that when I'm a big fan from him, was impossible to not say no, and looks like a very interesting project, and in some way, to bring all my experience to him. But from the other side, also is my first time in the co-driver's place, so a lot of work for my side also.
The pair had received special dispensation from the race organisers to complete a pre-run of the route in order to gain more seat time and experience in the Toyota Hilux, a world apart from their regular rides for both of them. But even so, they entered the Lichtenburg 400 as regular entry and would start the race in whatever position they achieved during the qualifying race. Alonso had announced his intention to train in the discipline of cross-country racing after an initial test with the Toyota Gazoo Racing SA team back in March of this year in an area north of Uppington. The Spanish racing legend has his eye on the Dakar Rally, but is being realistic about his need to train hard and learn a lot in order to make the transition from tarmac formulas, where his bum was mere inches off the ground, to racing a Class FIA Hilux, with significantly more clearance between his nether regions and the gravel. Further training sessions ensued after the March test, with defending SACCS champion Ginil de Villiers playing a key role in mentoring Alonso. Sessions in Poland and Namibia have given Alonso plenty to digest prior to his first competitive outing in Lichtenburg. At the same time, Dakar biking legend Mark Comer has been learning the ropes as navigator. The affable Spaniard won the Dakar Rally in 2006, 2011, 2014 and 2015, riding a KTM. He's also done duty as race director of the Dakar, and while he admits that he never considered co-driving before, he jumped at the opportunity to race alongside Alonso. There can be no doubt that Comer's experience on the Dakar, especially in terms of navigating and reading the terrain, will be an invaluable asset to his illustrious driver, if indeed they enter the world's toughest motor race. Back in Lichtenburg, Alonso was given the opportunity to address the SACCS crews competing in the Lichtenburg 400, and the diminutive Spaniard showed his class by delivering an impromptu speech that captivated the audience and stole the hearts of even the most hardened competitors. To add to that, he proceeded to assist with the handing out of shoes to underprivileged school children, a tradition of the SACCS, who firmly believes in giving something back to the communities of the areas where the races take place. And all of this from a man who has won more F1 races than you can shake a stick at, and hopes to compete in Dakar come 2020. For now though, we leave the bright lights of the Dakar behind us and stay rooted in Lichtenburg, where round 5 of the championship was just about to get underway. The race HQ and DSP was set at the Lichtenburg showgrounds on the outskirts of town. This offered a great base as the start and finish were both within sight of the DSP, keeping everyone in the midst of the action. The race would be contested over 3 runs, starting with a qualifying race of 55 kilometers and 2 race loops of 190 kilometers each. Pristine weather graced the race, and it was time to get the show on the road in Lichtenburg. With Alonso and Coma in attendance, plenty of supporters came out to watch the Spanish pairing take on the South African Veld. And at 1 o'clock on Friday, the 14th of September, that's exactly what they got. The proceedings started with a ceremonial flag wave off at the DSP. The crews had to drive a couple of 100 meters across the main road to the start of the timed section. This gave them a moment to settle the nerves, focus on the task at hand, and then go hell for leather into the unknown. In recent times, the bat venom of Lance Strathui and Adrian Roots has been the car to beat. But the log leaders failed to score meaningful points in the previous round and now had a huge target on their backs. A target that brothers Tahir and Tala Masagi were more than happy to chase down. As it turned out, Strathui and Roots struggled with a misfire, which opened the doors for the Masagis, who took line honours by just over 50 seconds.
It's feeling great. Definitely we came in here to push hard and get it to the top. We want to try and finish on pole for the next 2 events to try and have a chance for the championship.
Sandra Jonk and husband Jaco were third fastest, 1 minute 32 seconds behind Strathui and Roots. And that was pretty much that for the Class A's, as John Thompson and Marisa Matten failed to complete the qualifier after breaking a side shaft. Guy Hanley and Hein Moore, however, were the 4th fastest special and leading car in Class P. They had class stalwarts Nick Gosselin and Andrew Massey just 5 seconds behind them, so a good fight was on the cards this time around. Spare a thought though for Julia Ferreira and Mohamed Mulson. The Class P crew wrong-slotted right before the end of the qualifier and failed to complete the loop. That meant starting from the back of the grid come the main event. Speaking of good fights, the competition in the side-by-side category has steadily been hotting up. In Lichtenburg, 6 of these feisty machines took to the starters' orders. Peter Walter and Pierre Jourdan went 5th fastest, with Christo Rose and Dirk Swart ahead of them. Dierwold van Breda and Johan de Toy pegged the lowest step of the podium, whilst class stalwarts Werner and Leon Mostert went 2nd fastest. This meant that the qualifying victory went to Theo Erasmus and Edward Odendahl, competing in their very first ever national event. But the Mosterts were only 2 seconds behind them, so they certainly had to keep an eye in their wing mirrors. And so onto the production vehicles, where Lance Woolridge and Ward Huxtable really needed a strong qualifier if they wanted to keep their overall title hopes alive. But a wrong slot early on saw the Castrol Ford crew tumble down the order, posting the 5th fastest time in qualifying. Not really the result they were after.
Yeah, look, I think the championship will be pretty wrapped up by this race. We still want to go win, we're still here to race. Had a bit of a terrible prologue, but we'll come out pushing again tomorrow.
Ahead of them, Jacques Van Tonder and Boyd Dreyer had a clean run in their Ford Ranger, whilst the Horn brothers in their Malalan Toyota Hilux went 3rd fastest. As they said before the race, they were now fighting for 2nd place in the championship, but going 3rd fastest in the qualifier was certainly a good start. They were pipped, however, by the Castrol Ford crew of Marcus Boomgaard and Kleber Cincia, who went 2nd fastest, just 6 seconds behind the pole setters. And the win in Class T? That went to none other than Atlas Copco's Gary Berthold and Jeff Minott in their Toyota Hilux. The pair never put a foot wrong and reaped the just rewards.
But this Atlas Copco Hilux really performed brilliantly and Jeff was on it, so we seem to be on the top of the podium for the T's.
Class S saw David Huddy and Gerard Skidder do what they do best. Keep it clean, keep it tidy, and bring the car home in one piece. Sadly, they'd be without competition for the Lichtenburg 400. It would be a one-horse show. Which brings us to the big guns, the Class FIA monsters at the head of the field. This class has grown considerably over the last few months, and no fewer than a dozen of them lined up for the start of the qualifier, including a car driven by Fernando Alonso and Mark Coma. This obviously drew a lot of attention, but for Alonso, it was all about being competitive. So when the flag dropped, the visitors launched with gusto, but quickly caught up with Mark Corbett and Rodney Burke in the 2-wheel drive CR6 buggy. Alonso hasn't done much racing in the dust before and found the going tough until Corbett pulled over and let him go through. After having a scary up on 2 wheels moment himself, Alonso got the bit back between his teeth and the Spanish pairing went on to post the 3rd fastest time of the day.
Yeah, it was a good day. Experiencing new things from the early kilometers. A little bit more stress when you are with the countdown and you have the green light and things like that.
But as far as the championship went, this was just a sideshow. At the sharp end of the field, it was the usual battle between Henk Ladergan and Brett Cummings versus Chanel de Villiers and Dennis Murphy. The two Toyota Gazoo Racing SA crews have been trading blows throughout the season, and the Lichtenburg 400 was no different. A couple of wrong slots cost de Villiers and Murphy dearly, and they had to settle for second place. This meant that Ladergan and Cummings took the win, pipping their teammates by 26 seconds on the day.
I don't know, it's a strange feeling. There's one or two places where you don't read it as well as you should, so tricky area.
Further back, Atlas Copco's Chris Visser and Donnie Stassen went fourth fastest, while Redline Motorsports' Ernst Roberts and Henry Kerner fended off a hard-charging Richard Leek and Zahir Badania to take fifth place by just 2 seconds. Here's confirmation of the results in the Class FIAs. It was a trio of Toyota Gazoo Racing SA cars that topped the standings, with Ladergan and Cummings taking the top honours, Alonso and Coma showing their pace by claiming third place. Gary Berthold, Jeff Minott set the pace in Class T, with the Brazilian pairing of Boomgaard and Cincia going second fastest. The special vehicles saw the Massages in the lead, with Truthui and Roots in second place. And the highly competitive side-by-side saw newcomers Erasmus and Odendahl edge the stalwarts, Mostert and Mostert by just 2 seconds, with Van Breda and De Toy in third. So there you have it, the championship to date, as well as the qualifying race from the Lichtenburg 400. Action aplenty already, plus a bit of Formula One royalty, just to make things even juicier in the Northwest Province. Join us again shortly as we bring you all the action from the main race at the Lichtenburg 400.
It's Pep's Summer of Style. Get our adorable baby boys shorts at a low $34.99. Shorts for your little preschooler at just $49.99. And funky shorts for the older boys at only $69.99. Come on down to Pep for a variety of boys' shorts at the lowest prices by far. From as little as R49.95, you can send your parcel with Paxi, available at Pep.
365 days, 20,000 liters of coffee, 40,000 flights, millions of miles, thousands of these, and these. Making sure everything is just one thing. Superior. Superior design, superior production, fit, finish, function, superior fabric, style and comfort. And same-day delivery. Lewis, the home of superior quality.
Abade bapha komabhovu man. Xolo mawethu xolo. Sopholile. Apha kotata siphethe indebe yehlabathi. Usiya umela thina sonke. Buye ndizapha umalalela. Siphethe iSuper Rugby. Apha komama siphethe iSevens Rugby. Unazo lesantya akashoti nganto. Shake soyizwaphi. Bengolo hlobo ke maxhego akuthi.
Inkosi asihambe ke. Sibheke phambili maliqhube ke lashi malibhale. Yenzeke imali.
Haga, a celebration of South African rugby excellence, exclusive to SuperSport, proudly brought to you by Hollywood Bets.
Grab new Nestle Cerelac Puffs, a delicious snack, specially designed for little hands.
Welcome back to the bustling metropolis of the northwestern town of Lichtenburg. Well, maybe not a bustling metropolis every day of the year, but it most certainly was for the weekend of round 5 of the South African cross-country series. Not only does the 40 or so crews with their families and friends bring a massive economic injection to the area, but the mixture of production cars and special vehicles also put up one heck of a show and spectacle, which were clearly appreciated by the drones of fans that braved the dusty conditions. Well, that and of course the event's other draw card, the little Spaniard, who's won his fair share of motor races in his long and distinguished career. The Lichtenburg Showgrounds played host to the event as it has done in the past, But the actual start of the race took place in the field across the road from the showgrounds. The cars started to line up according to their performances from the day before, so it was fastest first. And fastest from the day before was none other than Toyota Gazoo Racing SA's Henk Ladegan and Brett Cummings. The pair had one blemish on their scorecard for 2019 when they made a few mistakes in Botswana at this year's desert race. But consistent and fast performances on the rest meant that they had a firm grip on the overall championship lead. Second off the line, the sister Toyota Gazoo Racing SA Hilux of defending and multiple South African champions, Janelle de Villiers and Dennis Murphy, who had a few seconds to make up if they had any hopes of trying to catch their young teammate. And the excitement to see someone of Fernando Alonso's stature compete in Lichtenburg was simply immense. After setting the third fastest time of everyone during qualifying, Alonso, along with his Spanish co-driver Mark Coma, were third off the line, followed by the Atlas Copco version of the Toyota Hilux, driven by big man Chris Visser and the small man navigator Donnie Stassen. They were followed by the first of the Redline Motorsport Nissan Navaras, the first in the hands of Ernst Roberts and co-driver Henry Kerner, and the second, driven for the very first time by the talented young Richard Leek Jr. and the experienced Sahir Badania, occupying the co-driver seat. In total, more than 30 cars and crews dropped the clutch when the lights turned green in Lichtenburg. As the cars flew off the start line in 2-minute intervals, it meant that more than an hour has passed since the first few cars started their quest for glory. Spectators were enjoying the action as the fast cars were causing dust to fly over the farmlands, while back at base camp, the officials were trying to unravel the mystery that can sometimes be cross-country racing. The time it took to complete the qualifying race the day before gets added to the time it takes to complete each kilometre of the race on the Saturday, and only once a number of competitors have passed the same point en route can one start to form a picture of who was doing what in the race as it started to unfold. And it all seemed to point to the same thing. At the very top of the field, the race was becoming a battle of epic proportions between teammates Ladegan and de Villiers. The latter started the race with a deficit of 26 seconds following his qualifying run, and after completing another 100 kilometres of the race distance, that gap increased to 38 seconds. But to be very honest, most eyes were on the third car on the road, that of the Toyota Gazoo Racing Hilux of Fernando Alonso and Mark Coma. Everyone knew that the multiple world champion can drive a car, but driving a Hilux in Lichtenburg is somewhat different than driving a Ferrari around Monaco. And then it happened. The Spaniard tackled a sharp corner to the right, which made the left wheel dig into the soft sand and caused the Hilux to roll over. They were both unharmed, but it took some time to extract themselves before getting the Hilux back on its wheels. Once right side up, the Spanish duo continued their African odyssey, but the view through the very broken windscreen wasn't that great and severely hampered their further progress. Eventually, in the cockpit, the team decided to get rid of the windscreen. Decision correctly made and would allow them to complete the rest of the run with the pace increased. Both Spaniards, but especially the former motorcycle rider Mark Coma, must have felt right at home with the wind now rushing past their faces as they got back up to speed. But the amount of time lost meant that Alonso wasn't going to record a miracle result on his first ever cross-country outing, but he was most definitely gaining very valuable experience as the team prepares for 2020 Dakar. With Alonso out the way, Freiburg resident and winner of the desert race earlier this year, Chris Visser and co-driver Donnie Stassen had a clear road ahead of their Atlas Copco Hilux, which Visser used to his advantage in his effort to chase down the two factory Toyotas ahead of him. As the top drivers were nearing the end of the first half of the race, it became pretty clear that the guys were flying. Times of around 2 hours to complete 190 kilometers on dirt between farm gates, trees and other obstacles meant that the faster guys were averaging in the region of 100 kilometers an hour. The category for the side-by-side vehicles are growing each season, thanks to the fact that it makes national championship cross-country racing more affordable than ever. It's also been the domain of the Mostert brothers, where Werner and Leon Mostert have enjoyed a fairly dominant season so far from behind the wheel of their number GO2 Can-Am Maverick. But this time around, the sideys, as they are affectionately known, would yield a different result. The Mosterts broke a side shaft DSP to fix it and took a 10-hour penalty that would put them on the sidelines for the rest of the weekend. So let's count them down to see who did make it to the finish at the end of Loop 1 and the halfway marker of the race. Christo Rose and Dirk Swartz Can-Am was last of the side-by-sides in 5th place, somewhat off the pace set by newcomers to the sport and category, Ridwan and Mohamed Dada. Peter Walter and Pierre Jourdan reached the halfway mark in a provisional podium position, but the number 66 Can-Am Maverick had a deficit of more than 7 minutes to the similar car of Dierwold van Breda and Johan de Toy, who were comfortably sitting in 2nd position with 190 kilometers still to go. With the Mostets removed from the action, another newcomer pairing in the form of Theo Erasmus and Edward Odendahl grabbed the opportunity with both hands to claim the early lead, and a comfortable one at that. Erasmus had an advantage of around 15 minutes to his nearest rival, so a more than good start to the sport for the man who had his sights set on victory in only his first ever national outing.
It's get very fast. There's places we go 144 kilometers, but the wind is good, taking the dust away a bit, and a lot of fun.
Let's have a look then at the special vehicle category, and more specifically Class P, where Julio Ferreira, this time with Mohamed Mulsen, the one reading the notes from the other seat of the ACECO, were battling it out once again with class stalwarts and champions Nick Gosler and Andrew Massey in their Zarco Magnum. Ferreira was on the back foot following problems in qualifying the day before, handing old dog Gosler with a comfortable margin at the halfway mark. But in Lichtenburg, the specific battle was only for 2nd place. And that was because the blast from the past, Guy Hanley with Hein Moore reading the notes, returned to the sport from behind the wheel of the Century Racing CR2. Hanley continued from where he left off a few years ago and converted his good qualifying speed and pole position into an excellent race pace, taking a commanding lead in Class P at this important part of the event. Thunder and lightning equals dust in the case of the Mad Maxes in Class A of the special vehicle category. Remember, these machines have enormous amounts of power thanks to their huge V8 engines, and seeing that they only send power to the albeit gigantic rear wheels, the Class A vehicles are renowned for digging up the dirt wherever they go, and the farmlands around Lichtenburg was no different. We already told you that the championship leaders, Trethewey and Roots, didn't have it all their own way so far and qualified 51 seconds slower than the striker driven by the young Masachi brothers, with Tahir holding the steering wheel. The big man from KZN tried every trick in the book, but the gap between himself and co-driver Adrian Roots and the two youngsters in the striker hovered at around a minute. When both crews reached the DSP at Lichtenburg Showgrounds, a stopwatch revealed that Trethewey had closed the gap, and it was now 43 seconds, even though the big guy had some problems.
We have a bit of a power steering problem, so in the low RPM I'm battling a bit through the corners and that, but it's fine. Luan's having a look at it now. So we just get to the end today. That's the key here.
Tahir Masaji, on the other hand, was doing what he could to try and stay out front.
Firstly, I just want to thank the team and the sponsor Dunlop. I'm just trying to keep my head, keep the car on the road, but go as fast as I can to my limit.
The only other pairing with a chance to battle the crews were veteran racers John Thompson and co-driver Marisa Matten in their Zarco Challenger. Thompson failed to complete the qualifying race on Friday, so was racing with a severe time penalty on the Saturday of the race, knowing of course that anything could still happen to the two cars in front of him. Someone who was in with a chance to influence the Class A leaderboard was Sandra and Jaco Jank, but the Total Agri Porter decided to come to a near halt at the end of Loop 1, forcing the lady driver to the sidelines for the rest of the Lichtenburg 400. The culprit? A broken gearbox. Let's get back to the action in the dusty mealie fields around Lichtenburg, where David Huddy and Gerrit Skitter were giving it their all from behind the wheel of their aging Nissan Navara in Class S of the production vehicle car category. This is a car that former multiple champion and South African rally and racing legend Hannes Krobler used to drive many moons ago. For this race, it was the only car entered in Class S, but Huddy's mission is to go as fast as possible whilst also keeping this piece of motorsport history alive, something which he was doing very well here, once again, in Lichtenburg. As is often the case, Class T is where the bulk of the action was coming from, and this race was no different. Traditionally, there's been a massive battle between the likes of Lance Woolridge, Johan Horn, Jason Venter, Gary Berthold and Jacques Van Tonder from behind the wheels of their Toyotas and Ford Rangers. In Lichtenburg, the battle continued. Husband and wife, Bernard and Manette Johnson, found themselves at the back of this battle. But since this was only their second ever national outing, the pairing was still finding their feet at this level of racing. Omelo farmer Vos Prinsloo is still in his first national championship season. For this race, he also got a new navigator in the form of Sammy Redlingace, who normally sits alongside Jacques Van Tonder. Prinsloo started the race from 6th in class, but dropped to position after the first of 2 racing loops. Prinsloo finished the loop just 8 seconds behind the Ford of Redlingace's normal regular ride, the Ranger driven by Van Tonder. For this race, Van Tonder secured the services of factory Ford navigator Boyd Dreyer, but even so, they reached the halfway mark, 6th place in Class T. They were beaten to the DSP by another Ford, the Castrol Ford Cross Country Team Ranger of Brazilian crew Marcus Boomgaard and Kleber Cincia. The Brazilians actually had a great qualifying session the day before and started the race in 2nd position, but were forced to drop a few spots during loop number 1. Let's hear from the ever-friendly co-driver Kleber Cincia at the halfway marker.
Race in South Africa is very rough. We have to push hard to keep the car going. So, but it's a pleasure to us racing with you guys. It's a really nice championship, and we always inviting the guys in Brazil to race with you.
Their job was to support their teammates, and that's exactly what they did. Not the defending champions Lance Woolridge and Ward Huxtable needed much support though. The Castrol Ford Cross Country Team Racing Ranger only had to finish in Lichtenburg to claim the Class T title, and halfway through the race, Lance Woolridge was on target to achieve exactly that, albeit that he only occupied 4th position at this point in the race. The men on the move were none other than 4x4 Megaworld's Jason Venter and Jaco van Aert. Venter has recently concentrated more on the inland off-road series and has missed a number of national events as a result, but it didn't take the young man long to find his groove back. He started the race from a lowly 7th place, but worked his way up to 3rd in class, just 11 seconds behind the 2nd place pairing, which happened to be the Malalan Toyota Hilux of brothers Johan and Werner Horn. These two are former class champions, but things in 2019 have most certainly not gone their way, with all sorts of luck, mostly bad luck though, interfering with their progress. This time around, they had a fairly clean run, which allowed them to climb their way up to 2nd place on the Class T scoreboard. The horns were flying, but they weren't fast enough to bother the pairing that qualified in pole position. That was Gary Berthold and Jeff Minott, who didn't put a foot wrong inside the Atlas Copco Hilux as they extended their lead at the front of the Class T field with every passing kilometre.
100 metres going to come right, fast right.
With just 1 loop to go, Gary Berthold opened up a gap of 1 minute and 7 seconds over the Horn brothers. Good going at the front of a fast Class T field.
Yeah, it's absolutely great out there. I got to tell you, this Atlas Copco Hilux is doing the trick, but we certainly got the hammer down. The competition's tight, and it's a big thing to win this class today, so we're giving it a full go.
Here's the confirmation of the standings after Friday's qualifying race and the first of the race's 2 loops. David Huddy continues to make Class S his own, while the top of the Class T leaderboard was a busy place, with the names of Berthold at the top, ahead of the Horn brothers and Jason Venter. Lance Woolridge was outside of a podium spot at this stage, but on course to clinch the Class T title. The remaining race cars were receiving some much-needed attention back at the designated service park at the Lichtenburg Showgrounds. Time for both man and machine to get a little rest before the last grueling 190 kilometres. Berthold was leading Class T, whilst Johan Horn was reflecting on the race so far and making plans for the remainder of the event.
Good. So yeah, Gary's still ahead apparently, so we'll see what we can do the next loop.
And finally, we move on to the race in the class for FIA specification cars. This simply means that these cars are exactly the same specification as the ones that you will find racing at Dakar. In fact, a number of these cars have already seen some Dakar action, with a few more on the list to go to Saudi Arabia come 2020. One such car was the King Price Extreme vehicle driven by Schalk Burger alongside Alvin Vonk. It wasn't all going Berger's way, as he found himself down in 10th position after Loop 1. The car just in front of them belonged to Mark Corbett and Rodney Burke. This was a brand new CR6 for Corbett, who does have a Dakar finish under his belt, but this was his first race back after a serious crash just 1 year ago, and the businessman was easing his way back into this brutal sport. Someone who's made great progress since taking up the sport later in life is Ernst Roberts. Together with Henry Kerner, the Red Line Motorsport and Nissan Navara crew reached the DSP, but were hoping to improve on their current 8th position. The difference between Roberts and the father and son combination of Johan and Sean van Staden ahead of them was a mere 26 seconds. It was their first national outing together in the Alfa Renault Duster, and they found the going fairly tough thanks to some power steering issues that cropped up. The Van Stadens had their sights set on the next FIA car down the road, the second of the King Price Extreme vehicles. This one was driven by Clint Weston, who was only competing in his second ever cross-country race. But with the help of Rian Trailing alongside him, Weston was doing a great job so far.
2 hours solid of pure concentration and flat out. And then a quick 90 left, a quick 90 right, and a dam, and a pylon, and a this and a that.
Another man on the charge was youngster Richard Leek and Zahir Badania in the Red Line Motorsport and Nissan Navara. Leek was blisteringly quick early on, but running into dust hampered his progress somewhat and forced the talented youngster to settle for 5th at the halfway mark.
Yeah, it started off very well for us, and I think we caught the car ahead of us about 14 k's into the stage. And from about there, I think we sat for about 150 k's behind him. The dust is so thick, we can't just get close enough for the buzzer to work.
Leek, however, was not the only one complaining about the dust. Toyota Gazoo Racing SA driver Shamir Variawa, with Jean Moore alongside him, had a very similar story to tell. Variawa started the loop as the 7th class FIA car, and despite the dust, managed to crawl his way up into 4th.
We pushed and we caught into the dust, and that's where we stayed. The dust is a bit of a problem.
And then there were 3. The contenders, defending and multiple South African champions Chanel de Villiers and Dennis Murphy. The young guns and championship points leaders Henk Laderkan alongside Brett Cummings, and former champion and winner of this year's desert race, Chris Visser, and his new navigator, Donnie Stassen. Just 44 seconds separated all 3 of these crews at the start of the 190-kilometre loop, and we know from earlier on that the gap stayed pretty much the same at some of the halfway splits. But it's how they arrived back in Lichtenburg and when they stopped the stopwatch that really matters. And it was pretty clear that Laderkan and Cummings, although also fighting for the championship, had the bit between their teeth as they slowly increased their overnight lead from 26 seconds to a full minute and 12 seconds. It was good going by the young Toyota Gazoo Racing SA driver. This meant that de Villiers could see not only the race, but also the title start to slip away, as there was not much the second of the Toyota Gazoo Racing SA drivers could do about the speed of his young teammate at the front of the field. Add to this the fact that de Villiers was battling a severe cold, and the Dakar legend wouldn't have been too dissatisfied with his second position. On the flip side, de Villiers managed to also slightly extend his advantage over the flying Atlas Copco Hilux, driven by Visser and Stassen behind him. Visser would have wanted to lessen the gap, but the fast Northwest farmer had a small technical issue inside his Hilux, which slowed them down a touch. Here's navigator Stassen to explain.
We've got a slight vibration left rear, which they're searching for now. Hopefully not something severe.
Here it is, proof of Laderkan's lead at the top over teammate de Villiers and Chris Visser, taking up the current 3rd position. Shamir Variawa was a creditable 4th ahead of the first of the Nissans, this time now driven by Richard Leek in 5th. Back in the DSP, Chanel de Villiers is not normally one to make up excuses, but this time he had a valid explanation for why he wasn't able to fight with his teammates.
I battled a bit with a cold, at the end to keep the pace. My chest is a bit tight, so in the beginning I could push nicely, but towards the end I was definitely not on the pace I should be.
And let's hear from our race leader how he managed to stay in the lead of the Lichtenburg 400.
Kept it clean, went easy over the rocks and pushed there where we could see, so it was lacquer run.
After the break, the drama will carry on, the action will continue, and the dust will most certainly fly as we reach the climax of the Lichtenburg 400. So join us for the conclusion after the break.
I'm nervous. It's okay to be nervous on your first day, but you'll make lots of friends, and I'll be here when you get back. With iWise Life Insurance, I provide for my family.
Get 1 million Rand cover from just 189 Rand per month with iWise Life Insurance. For a quote, SMS Live to 48853.
Science reaches for the truth. Science works for the big and the small, the old and the young. Science never gives up. And science is at the heart of biology-based nutrition for differences you can see, feel, and trust. The secret to lifelong health, it all starts with science.
Oh, he turns straight away. It's brilliant from Italy.
The Rugby World Cup. Catch all 48 games on SuperSport. Proudly brought to you by Heineken and Spur. Only on DStv Premium.
Now the break, and it's headed firmly in. Goal! And it's gone straight in. Tested the goalkeeper. He will be now. Eto, goal!
Watch the Serie A Titans of Italy on SuperSport, your world of champions.
Welcome back to the northwest town of Lichtenburg, where cross-country racing history was made during round 5 of the South African Cross-Country Championship. A host of talented South African drivers and crews were battling it out for individual class and championship glory. But Lichtenburg also played host to double Formula One world champion, double Le Mans winner, and current world endurance champion, Fernando Alonso's cross-country racing debut. Unfortunately for the Spaniard and his equally famous co-driver Mark Comer, their debut didn't quite go according to plan after rolling their Hilux early on in Loop 1. As the Spaniard had a plane to catch later that afternoon, he was given special compensation to also tackle the second loop of the race, but by himself and 15 minutes ahead of the rest of the field. Alonso is no doubt a true racer and set off to gain more valuable experience, but just 4 kilometers into the loop, their Hilux hit a flock of birds, with one of them completely destroying the windscreen. The Spaniard battled his way through the 190-kilometer route with very little visibility, but completed the race and earned valuable experience in the process. Back to the little matter of who would end up winning the actual race, and perhaps even a championship or two. All that stood between the remaining crews and the checkered flag was 190 kilometers of dirt tracks on northwest farmland. It was exactly the same 190 kilometers from Loop 1, so the crews knew exactly where they were going, which meant the pace was going to be fast and furious from here on out. As the leaders of the race, Henk Ladergan and Brett Cummings, were the first ones to tackle Loop 2, closely followed by their Toyota Gazoo Racing SA teammates, Junior de Villiers and Dennis Murphy. The two Atlas Copco Hilux buckies of Chris Visser and Gary Berthold were next in the line, followed by the rest of the field, who all set off, as before, in 2-minute intervals. But before we tell you about the top guys and how they arrived at the end a few hours later, let's shift our attention to the teams in the special vehicle category, and more specifically, the class for the side-by-side vehicles, as we count them down. After failing to complete Loop 1, the Mosters took a 10-hour penalty and went on to complete Loop number 2, but they were classified as the last finishers on the day. When all the times were added up, Christo Rose and Dirk Swart emerged in 5th place in the number G22 Can-Am Maverick. And then we saw something that doesn't happen every day. After 400 kilometers of flat-out racing, the cars of Ridwan and Mohamed Dada and the one driven by Peter Walter and Pierre Jourdan stopped the clock on exactly the same time. We had a tie at 6 hours 20 minutes and 16 seconds for both crews, with Walter eventually getting awarded the podium finish courtesy of the fact that his qualifying time was just faster. This means that the victory was going to go to either Dierwold van Breda and Johan de Tooy, or newcomers Theo Erasmus and Edward Odendaal. In the end, it was a fairy tale ending for Erasmus, who claimed victory in only his first ever national outing, with a winning margin of around 8 minutes. For most of the cars in the Class P of the special vehicle category, Lichtenburg proved a bridge too far. Guy Henley had a comfortable lead after Loop 1, but was forced to retire early in Loop number 2, while even the usually very reliable crew of Nick Gosselin and Andrew Massey were forced to throw in the towel thanks to a broken cylinder in the engine of their Zarco Magnum. This proved the age-old cliché that to finish first you must finish, and that's exactly what Julio Ferreira and co-driver Mohammed Mulson did.
Look here, we're trying our best. I mean, it's all about racing. I wouldn't want to say much about who's better, who's best out of it. It's all about racing.
The high attrition rate here in Lichtenburg literally caused havoc in the category for special vehicles, with only a handful of Class A cars making it to the finish line. We already lost the total ag reporter of the Yonks on Loop 1, and after leading at the halfway mark, everyone thought that the young Masagi brothers were finally going to get the monkey off their back by holding on and claiming the victory. But this wasn't to be, as Lady Luck once again turned her back on the brothers, who were forced to retire from yet another race due to mechanical issues. This meant that all the big dog Lance Trethewey and navigator Adrian Roots had to do to claim their overall class title was to simply finish the race. This would normally not be a problem for the Italian, but he too found the going tough here in Lichtenburg. In the end, and after sweating more than normal, the big man crossed the line, second position on the day, but good enough to claim the overall special vehicle title.
Our first national championship ever. I mean, it's been a long time coming. Adrian did an unbelievably great job this year on the roads. You know, we've made one, or if I can count them on one hand, the overshoots and that. And you know, to my team and with Luan and Sandra and the kids, with everybody, you know, without everybody, you know, doing this, we wouldn't be here today. And to them, I just say thank you very much.
So Trethewey won the overall war, but who took the battle on the day? Well, after failing to finish the qualifying race the day before, John Thompson and co-driver Marisa Matten were most certainly not betting on themselves to stand on the top step of the podium come Saturday, but that's exactly what they did. It was the pair's first ever victory in Class A, and a hard-fought one at that.
Absolute madness. I tell you, I've never done that, but for us it's excellent. I'm happy. You know, we did have our trouble. We had puncture, fuel issues, but the car's good, she's strong, and yeah, look, for us it's a tremendous finish. I'm really happy.
After a tough 2 days and 400 kilometers of racing through the Lichtenburg farmlands and surrounding areas, it was time for all the drivers in the special vehicle category to get the sweet taste of victory. Well, not all of them, of course, but most definitely the ones who managed to survive the tough route and ended up on the podium. Here's the confirmation of Theo Erasmus and Edward Odendaal's maiden victory in the side-by-side class over Dierwold van Breda and Johan de Tooy, with Peter Walter and Pio Jordan rounding out the podium. Julio Ferreira and Mohammed Mulson were the only survivors in Class P, while second place in Class A was enough to net Lance Trethewey and Adrian Roots the overall championship, while John Thompson and Marisa Matten took their first win of the season. The Lichtenburg 400 was nearing its end, with all or most of the production cars crossing the line and stopping the stopwatch. It was time to add up the numbers. There wasn't much calculation required to declare David Huddy and Gerrit Skedder the winners of Class S, but although they were the only ones in the class, Huddy did what he normally does. That is to fight through whatever the race throws at him and bring it home, which was once again what he did. Whereas Class S only had the one entry, there were still 8 runners in Class T in the race, with around 6 of them all fighting for the podium places. Unfortunately for Vos Prinsloo and Sammy Redlingace, they were forced to retire, whilst the aging Hilux of Bernard and Manette Johnston was classified as the last finisher in Class T. And this is how the remainder of the Class T field crossed the line. Harry Smith resident Jacques Van Tonder and Boyd Dreyer crossed the line in 6th position, around 5 minutes slower than the 5th placed Castrol Ford cross-country racing ranger of Brazilians Marcus Baumgart and Kleber Cincia. The sister of Castrol Ford of Lance Woolridge and Ward Huxtable's time was good enough for 4th in the hotly contested Class T, but more importantly, the points that came with 4th were good enough for the team to repeat their Class T championship. Woolwich was, however, missing out on the podium finish, as a strong second loop for Jason Venter and Jaco van Aert saw the 4x4 Mega World Hilux rocket up the leaderboard into third place. They were around a minute slower than the Malalan Toto Hilux of brothers Johan and Werner Horn, who for once seemed to have beaten the bad luck to record a podium finish with a fine second place. But to be honest, everyone was always only going to be fighting for second, as the man who set the fastest pace in qualifying continued to do so in both loops 1 and 2. Gary Berthold and Jeff Minott led from start to finish from behind the wheel of their Atlas Copco Hilux to claim victory here in Lichtenburg. Or so everyone thought. There was a controlled speed zone earlier in the race on a public road behind the neighbouring town of Kalini. In such a zone, the rule states that competitors are limited to driving no more than 50 kilometers an hour. After analysing the data, it was found that almost the entire field exceeded the speed limit, in most cases by only a single kilometre per hour, but the rules unfortunately had to be applied and almost every single competitor was handed a time penalty. Some received 5 minutes, whilst others were docked with 10. Either way, the penalty severely impacted the scoreboard. Jason Venter was the big winner after the reshuffle, as the 4x4 Mega World Hilux was declared Class T winner, with Lance Woolwich climbing from 4th up onto the second step of the podium. The big loser was Gary Berthold, who had to surrender his victory and settle for 3rd, followed by Marcus Boomgaard and Jacques van Tonder, who climbed to 5th due to not getting any penalties. So this is what the scoreboard looked like after the major reshuffle. Huddy still took the spoils in Class S, but it's Venter who went from 3rd to 1st ahead of Class T champion Lance Woolwich, and Gary Berthold dropped from 1st to 3rd. Boomgaard got 4th ahead of Van Tonder and the Horn brothers. The 3rd step was not the step Berthold wanted to spray the champagne from, whereas 2nd was good enough for Woolwich to claim yet another Class T title.
It was a real ding-dong race. Like I said earlier, it was really fast and there wasn't much time to make up time anyway, because everyone's going flat out. But it was good, it was a good race.
And a happy return to the top step for Mega Worlds, Jason Venter. Here's Father Dion giving us the lowdown on the team's performance.
We were looking for a couple of technical things that we've been running short on Dylan's car. And Jason with a little bit more experience, and Jaco, we thought that's how we get the car sorted out and bring it to a national. And what a surprise, guys, these guys killed it.
All that was left to do was to count down the final finishers in Class FIA and to see who would occupy the very top step of the podium. The steep learning curve continued for Skoltberger and Alvin Vonk, who reached the end of Lichtenburg around 10 minutes slower than the next FIA car up the road, which was the Redline Motorsport Nissan Navara of Ernst Roberts and Henry Kerner. Roberts was beaten to the line by the Alfa Renault Duster of father and son pairing Johan and Sean van Staden, who were really pleased to finish their first race outing together. Another crew who would have been pleased was Mark Corbett and Rodney Burke, who returned to the sport after a horrific crash 1 year ago, so 7th was good enough for them on their return. It wasn't as good as 6th though, and 6 in class is where Clint Weston finished in only his 2nd ever national cross-country race. With Ruan Kreiling reading the notes, the versatile motorsportsman drew a line in the sand, and everyone can expect to see more from him in future. But then the same can be said for young gun Richard Leake and co-driver Zahir Baranya, who crossed the finish as the 5th fastest Class FIA car, and that after losing loads of time in the dust and driving the Redline Motorsport Nissan Navara for the very first time. We're now getting to the business side of things, where Shamir Variawa and Jean Moore were trying their very best in the Toyota Gazoo Racing SA Hilux to catch up to the Atlas Copco version driven by Chris Visser and Donnie Stassen. Up for grabs, the final podium position. Variawa tried, but the Freiburg farmer was simply too fast on the day and recorded the 3rd fastest race time of all in Lichtenburg. So with that settled, all that remained was to see who would win the race. The contenders? Toyota Gazoo Racing SA teammates Henk Ladergan and Brett Cummings, and Janelle de Villiers and Dennis Murphy. De Villiers was feeling ill and had a deficit of more than 1 minute going onto the final loop, but the Dakar legend was clearly feeling better as he started to reel Ladergan in. The youngster, on the other hand, didn't give up and fought back, exactly the kind of thing that race fans wanted to see. In the end, it was a closely fought affair as de Villiers got to within just 11 seconds of his young teammate. So close, but no cigar. Or was it? Remember the penalties? Well, it turns out that de Villiers was just about the only one not to get penalised. This resulted in him and teammate Lichtenburg swapping positions at the top of the standings. And these were the new standings. De Villiers was declared the winner over Lichtenburg, with youngster Richard Leek jumping up onto the podium, whilst Chris Visser and Shamir Varioa were relegated to 4th and 5th respectively. So it was de Villiers and Murphy who ended up on the top step of the podium after a hard day's racing, ahead of teammates Lichtenburg and a great performance by youngster Richard Leek.
On the second loop, I said to Dennis, let's try and be perfect and let's try and go as fast as we can. So we managed to pull back quite a bit of time. In the end it was 1 minute and 1 second, but I knew it was going to be close. In the end it was 11 seconds. Now we won the race, which we'll take for sure.
So de Villiers got the win on the day, but Lichtenburg had even more to celebrate, as his second position was enough to earn him the title as South African cross-country champion.
Yeah, no, finally. It's taken 10 years to finally win my first championship. Started racing when I was 15 in a little Toyota Taz. Brought it all the way back to another Toyota, a bit quicker one this time, but yeah, finally got that championship.
The Lichtenburg 400 will be remembered for many things. Lichtenburg became the youngest overall champion ever, but it took one of the best drivers the world has ever seen to steal the spotlight. A real feather in the cap for the South African cross-country series that Fernando Alonso chose our championship to start the next chapter in his motorsport career.
Yeah, it was good. I think the race was very, very nice, very professional and very well organized. So, definitely a good thing that we experienced this weekend. And hopefully he finished now with a good result for the Toyota Gazoo as well with Hank and Janil. So, yeah, positive weekend.
And to sum it all up, here is Toyota team boss Glenn Hall.
Invaluable experience, absolutely. It's part of the whole makeup. We are fast tracking one of the best drivers the world has ever seen in the history of motorsport into a discipline that he's never been in before in 5 months to prepare for the world's toughest race. It's an impossible task. So far it's going well, even if we include today. That sort of experience they have to have. So it's not a surprise when it happens on the big race, if indeed we get to do it.
And that was it from the Lichtenburg 400, the penultimate round of the 2019 South African Cross Country Series. We'll see you for the grand finale in the Free State town of Parys on the 1st and 2nd of November. The highlights of the Lichtenburg 400 were brought to you by Toyota, Ford, Total Quartz and Pirelli.